Today's training presentation is entitled Dear Fellow Officials. Dear fellow officials, today we are going to get some things off our chest. From one official to another official, here are some things we feel that you may not comprehend or have knowledge. Knowledge of these things hopefully will result in better working relationships and interactions among us. As an aside, for those people listening to this presentation who may not be sporting officials or referees, there are a lot of life principles and values in this presentation that if you work in any sort of professional capacity may prove useful. So while this presentation is focusing on sports officials and referees, anyone that works in any profession can gain value from this presentation. We hope you enjoy it. Dear fellow officials, we will speak on how you talk to us. We will speak on your attitude and demeanor, and we will speak on issues of professionalism. Let us begin. Dear fellow officials, man, life is different for our female officiating counterparts. And this is true not only in officiating, but just in life. Now, we could spend an entire separate presentation on this subject alone, but because we have so much to cover, we're going to cover this briefly, but we will make reference to this. So in the professional world, life is different between men and women. That is a reality. Hopefully, we will get to the point in life where women should be viewed as they should be. They are competent and capable, intelligent professionals. They just happen to be female. Men, please be mindful of this before you open your mouths and you spout any wisdom in the direction of your female counterparts. Women have a whole set of different issues that they have to fairly and but most of the time unfairly deal with just because they are women. We're talking about issues with regards to wages. We are talking issues with regards to sexuality. We are talking about issues with regards to physical appearance. And we could go on and on and on and on. Women come in to this particular industry where men up to this point are the more dominant force as far as being in number or as far as in positions of power. So women are already dealing with that. Then they're dealing with issues where they have to be authority figures not only over other females but males as well. So you have a power dynamic in play as well. You also have a dynamic that if men and even some women deem a female official as attractive, are they being hit on, which is very unprofessional. That's another dynamic that we must consider in the world of female officiating. So, fellas, if you're listening to me, consider all of those things before you open your mouth and spout your wisdom towards some of our female officiating counterparts. They are professionals. Treat them as such. They just happen to be women. We can see the very same thing and view it completely differently. For instance, we can look at the sky. The sky may be clear. Somebody else may look at that same clear sky and say that it's blue. Both things could be true. So just imagine if you're watching plays in a sporting contest. Imagine if you're officiating said plays in the officiating contest. It's the very same principle. Got a quick example for you. I was officiating the middle school basketball contest recently with a partner of mine. And from my viewpoint, we had a young man who did not travel. He did not lift his pivot foot or return it to the ground. He just took a very big step with his non-pivot foot, and it just looked really, really ugly. My partner called a traveling violation on the young man in question. Okay, we talk about this play at halftime. My partner gives his perspective. I give my perspective. We respectfully acknowledge each other's perspective and even acknowledge that if our angles and positions had been reversed, we may have seen it from the perspective of the other person. Just an example of how we can see the very same thing and view it completely differently. Sometimes two seemingly different things can be true at the same time. In officiating, some sports do well in terms of inclusion, yet still have issues of exclusion. We don't have time to dive into that today, but believe me, we will dive into that at some point in the future. In sports, we can have violations by opposing teams at the same time. Sometimes two opposing things can be true at the same time. We talked about earlier where sports can do well in terms of inclusion and yet still have issues of exclusion. Sports in general do well in a whole lot of areas. Yet at the same time, there are many areas in sports that need improvement and reform. Sometimes it is in the areas where sports do very well, yet still need improvement and still need reform. Don't tell someone that they didn't see something simply because you don't view it the same way. This is where we lose a lot of people. And I do mean a lot of people. Not only just in officiating, but in life. If you disagree with someone on what happened, most people's natural reaction is to always jump to that it didn't happen. Why is that our default response? What would be a better response would be to simply give your accounts of the events from your perspective and yet acknowledge that there's a possibility that their perspective is either true or the fact that you respect and acknowledge their viewpoint and their perspective. Don't dismiss someone's perspective simply because it differs from yours. Funny thing about life, for most of us, it allows us the freedom to view things differently. We have different eyes, different minds. Respect someone's perspective by listening and acknowledging. You are free to agree or disagree with said perspective after listening and acknowledging. I shouldn't have to really explain that to you, should I? That's pretty simple to understand. And yet, many of us do not do it. Don't dismiss someone's feelings simply because it differs from yours. We all have different levels of sensitivity. We all have different levels of tolerance. We are allowed to feel positively, negatively, indifferent, or not at all without undue and unwarranted criticism about said feelings. For some of you, this may be an extreme example, but it will prove the point of which we're trying to make. When someone passes away, or someone dies. We all deal with grief differently. Some people cry, some people don't cry, some people withdraw, some people don't. We deal with grief and death differently. We feel different things about grief and death, especially when the person that has passed away is connected to us in some form or fashion. If a person cries at someone's passing, those are their feelings. It does not make them weak. They are allowed to have those. If another person does not cry but withdraws and wants privacy, they are dealing with their feelings and they are processing it differently. They are allowed to do so. If someone else wants to talk about it with whomever listens, it is their process and their feelings. They are allowed to have those. So in life, in particular, we're talking about sports officiating in this training presentation, how a play person makes someone feel, no matter what the feeling is, the person who's having that feeling is allowed to have that. And we are not allowed to criticize unfairly and unfairly judge that person for having those feelings. Because one of the most unhealthy things about feelings that if people feel like their feelings are going to be disrespected, criticized, and judged negatively and harshly, they will not want to express those feelings to others. And not having the ability and the fear of expressing feelings is unhealthy, not only mentally and emotionally, but physically as well. We must be open to and willing to accept honest truths and constructive feedback and criticism. I'm gonna let that marinate for a couple of seconds. Okay, there was only one perfect person in the history of our world for those people who have that belief. That one perfect person is certainly none of us, certainly is not me. We cannot become better at anything if we are never told where improvements are needed. We cannot become better at anything if we are not open to the fact that we can always be better. You want to take this a step further for most of you? Most of you, in dealing with people who offer you honest truths and constructive feedback and criticism, are more worried about the messenger than the message. You are more worried about how it is being presented to you and will said presentation of the message hurt your little feelings. You forget that the most important part in all of this is the message to help you become better at what it is that potentially you need to become better at. This is such a problem with a large part of our society because we negatively interact with those people in authority who are in charge of educating us, training us, evaluating us, and tasked with helping us to become our best selves. This is not just a sports officiating issue, it is a life issue. And I better probably move on to the next slide before I really get on the soapbox about this. But I have a feeling that we will revisit this somewhere in this presentation. Speaking of messengers and messages, so not all officials are the best messengers of constructive feedback and criticism. This is probably a life principle for people as well. Said officials are not good enough at officiating said sport to be given feedback and criticism to others. Layman's terms, you don't have any damn credibility. You're not good at what you do to be given evaluations and feedback to anyone. Said officials are great at officiating said sport, but they don't have the capacity to relay such knowledge to others, which is going to segue into point 3. Very few people walking this earth have the ability to teach. If I could get a little deeper with this, sometimes some of the best and most talented people at something are not the best teachers. And sometimes some of the best teachers are not always the most talented people. Said officials are closed minded and only see through their own lenses. That's actually a lot of people. Is that you? Said officials, oh my goodness, if I were in church, I could have a whole sermon on this last point. We're going to revisit this one a lot. Said officials equate many years in a profession for knowledge and wisdom. I'm not going to dive deep into this one yet because we're going to dive deep into this one momentarily. There is a difference between refereeing and officiating. Think about this statement like this. At a public wedding, and when I mean public wedding is I'm talking about where there's the bride and the groom, bridesmaids, groomsmen, a person conducting the wedding, family members and friends, the whole nine. At a public wedding, does the conductor of the wedding festivities referee the wedding or officiate the wedding? I'm gonna leave that right there for you to think about. If the wedding is taking place at a church and a member of the clergy, such as a pastor or a preacher, is in charge of the festivities, is he or she refereeing the wedding or officiating the wedding? Here it is. I could really stop this training presentation on this slide, but we have more. For some of you, and I may be being very nice when I say some of you, because I probably should say for most of you. For some of you, your 30 years of refereeing is less than my current 15 years of officiating. If this statement offends you in any way, there's only one thing I have to say to that. Good. Because some of you have the audacity, the unmitigated gall to equate decades of refereeing to officiating knowledge and wisdom. Because someone out there has put you in games and contests and matches for 20, 25, 30 years and you received a plaque or a certificate or recognition for your years of service, you somewhere along the line begin to buy in that you are good at your job, and you're not. Somebody has just been crazy enough to let you referee for 30 years. There is a difference between refereeing and officiating. And those of you who know what I'm talking about completely agree with that. And those people that are offended by that, ask the people that agree with me what the difference is. Oh my. There is a difference between hearing and listening. So initially, when I started working on this presentation, my daughters were upstairs playing, and they were talking to each other and they were interacting. And I heard every word they were saying. At the same time, I was listening to my own thoughts as I put them down in this PowerPoint. If I'm officiating a basketball game, on the court, I can hear fans talking and yelling while I am watching and listening to the action taking place on the basketball court. Do you see the difference? And here's funny. The place where we mess up in life is that we don't understand that there's a difference between hearing and listening. And it affects not only sports officials, but it affects the relationships that we have in life with people. If we just hear someone speaking as opposed to listening to them, you should be able to finish that sentence as you see by my dot 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 after the word them. Most of you hear people talking. Very few of you actually listen to what they are saying. I'm going to say that one more time, just in case you are hearing me and not listening. Most of you hear people talking and saying words. Very few of you actually listen to what they have to say. If you don't believe me, 9 out of 10 relationships that fail in life fail because you hear what the other person was saying as opposed to listening to what they were saying. Man, let me move on to the next slide before I get on the soapbox about this. Evaluation and training are not equivalent. If you've listened to past training presentations given by me, you know this is a big, big sticking point for me. And I've mentioned this and I've dove into this subject a lot. So I'm not going to dive into it here. I'm just going to make it make sense for those of you who have not had the pleasure of listening to me. Evaluation is an assessment of one's performance. Can you learn and be educated in an evaluation? Sure, you can. Can training take place in an evaluation? Sure, it can. Training is teaching and or the development of skills and knowledge. Evaluations may not take place when you're being trained, i.e., being taught. And training may not take place when you're being evaluated. The point is, you can clearly see they are not equivalent. And do not let someone in the world of sports officiating that is in power tell you that they are the same. They are not. This particular point was my motivation for creating this training presentation. Avoid judging a situation that you have not experienced yourself. We talked about men and women earlier. Need I say more? Men, there's many things about women that you will never be able to tell women because you will never go through it because for us men, we are not women. So therefore, can we intelligently speak on situations we have yet to experience? Yes, but only if we listen first. Can we assess the person who has experienced said situation when we have not experienced? No. Heck no, and hell no. And I'm not talking about just necessarily negative situations. We could be talking about positive situations as well. I'll make it easy for you. Watch this. So, for people who know me, have known me for a long time, some people would tell you that I'm really good at giving advice. I pride myself on being blessed enough that I am intelligent enough to sit down with many people, listen to them, process what they're telling me, look at as many sides as I possibly can, and then have something to say. So I've had many people on my couches, in my home, and outside my home, and have listened to many situations. Prior to getting married, you know what I didn't advise people, or when I didn't advise people? I did not advise married people when I had never been in a marriage myself. Because I'm avoiding judging a situation that I have never experienced. I'm blessed enough to be married now at the time of this presentation for 14 years. Shout out to my wife. But even then, I still don't really give marriage advice because every marriage is different. And there are some things in my marriage that other marriages are not going to experience, and vice versa. So I try to avoid judging situations that I have not personally experienced. And even if I have, I'm still careful with what I say and what I offer. So sports officials, for those wise men and women out there, take great care of the advice and counsel that you give and how you give it, especially if you have not been in said situation that you're giving advice and counsel to. Can you give advice and counsel? Yes, absolutely. Don't judge it when you haven't been there. Sometimes it is better to offer your fellow official an alternative method or approach as opposed to the right one. Okay, this is where a lot of officiating relationships with people fail. This is why a lot of officials, having worked a contest with someone, does not want to work with said official any longer. This is one of the reasons right here. Again, I'm going to make an addendum to here. Your 30 years may not equate to my 15. My 15 may not equate to someone's 2. Somebody with 2 may be a way better official than me at 15, and vice versa. Keep that in mind as we dive into this. This happens a lot when we're discussing plays. And when one official feels as though another official has made an inaccurate ruling and or decision, and we're in a space or environment where we're discussing a said play. So what if the official that you are offering the right solution actually made the correct, accurate ruling? What makes you the great and powerful odds? Does your standing as the crew chief fuel your ego of righteousness? Are you willing to listen first and speak second? Answer to that is probably no. And if you don't believe me, we're going to talk about this point soon. In this moment, are you treating your fellow official as an equal partner, a student, or a child? Said officials equate many years in a profession for knowledge and wisdom. Say amen if you've heard that one before somewhere. Why don't you apply rules and mechanics yourself? Yet you see yourself as an expert in said rules and mechanics. Again, what makes you the great and powerful Oz? Does your standing as the crew chief fuel your ego of righteousness? Again, do you equate many years of refereeing to officiating knowledge and wisdom? Do you actually know the current rule and mechanics, or are you relying on knowledge of the old rule and mechanics? Are you applying your own personal philosophy and interpretations to a particular rule or mechanic? When is the last time that you opened the rule book, case book, mechanics manual, and officiating manual? Here we go. Okay, this is the one. This one is going to tie in some future slides further in this presentation. Be more professional and less friendly on the job. Now, I know there's some knucklehead who does not read entire sentences, paragraphs, and chapters, and is going to look at that statement and said, well, he said, don't be friendly on the job. No, let me read this again. Be more professional and less friendly on the job. Less friendly does not mean don't be friendly. Watch what I tell you. Officiating is a job, not a hobby. Games are workplaces. Games are not events for you to catch up with family and friends. Why are you having a long social conversation with one coach during pregame and not speaking to a coach on the other team? Why are you having social conversations during dead balls and timeouts, excuse me, as opposed to observing your timeout responsibilities? Ladies and gentlemen, in officiating in every sport during dead balls and timeouts, the rules of said sport as well as the mechanics ensure that we have responsibilities. We have things to do. Dead balls and timeouts are still part of the game, which is work. Are you one of those officials that when you make a call, you're ready to justify it verbally to the head coach almost every time? A lot of you gonna say no, but a lot of you who say no, you are that person. Why are you having a long social conversation as opposed to observing your pregame responsibilities? I'm not talking about a social conversation with your officiating partners while you're observing teams, the venue, the facilities, and bench personnel. I'm talking about having social conversations with people who are not a part of your officiating crew. More of you are guilty of this than you are willing to admit. One of the things that I like about me is that I am a long term thinker. I'm always thinking about my impact of doing things in the long term, the decisions that I make in the long term. So, in officiating, one of the things that I'm always considering for myself is my job performance and what it's impacting besides my own job standing. So, my job performance impacts the manner in which your officiating partners, as well as yourself, are viewed in the current game. It impacts the standing of your member association and their ability to maintain and renegotiate the contract when the contract comes due. It impacts potential pay raises for you and your fellow officials. The manner in which your officiating partners and other officials are viewed in games moving forward. Let me stop right here on this one. If you are a sports official, a true sports official, and you're coming to a facility or a gym or a court or a field to work an organized contest, middle school, high school, or higher, how many times have you heard a coach or player come to you and say something along these lines? Well, in our last game, the official did this, or the official called this, or this official wasn't very good, or how are you going to call this because our last game, or last week, or last season? Something along those lines. Guys, job performance impacts everything in the world of sports officiating, and it impacts sports officials and how we're viewed as a whole. It only takes one really bad official to mess it up for everyone. I'm not saying all of us have to be great. I'm not even saying all of us have to be good, but we should be decent at worst, at a minimum, and we should be professional at all times. Decent and professional will get us through most games and contests 90% of the time. Our job performance individually affects the collective and it affects the whole. How many times have you been in a locker room or a classroom or wherever you and your fellow officials are meeting prior to a contest, during halftime or intermission, and after a contest, and you're discussing a play, and someone brings up the play that happened at a certain time, and the conversation does not, it actually begins with, well, on this play, you should have had this. That happens a lot, and it should not. When someone brings up a particular play or situation that happened at a certain time. A, a more professional approach would be, let's discuss this play at a certain time. Now, in most circumstances, there will be one or two officials who made a decision to make a call or not make a call. You know the person that should speak first on that particular play? The official who made the call or didn't make the call. They should be the first person to speak and offer perspective on their thought process and what led them to the decision to make a call or not make a call. Not an outsider viewing the play and feeling that the play was called incorrectly, which leads to all the points in this particular slide. How do you know that your analysis of said play would be the accurate rule? You don't, because we don't have a time machine to go back and say that your analysis of said play would be the accurate rule. Do you have enough professionalism within you to allow the calling official to give their perspective on said play first? How can you tell someone how they should see something or view something? Didn't we talk about this earlier, that we do not have the right to tell people how they should view or see something? Why not start the conversation with, what did you have on this play? And after they offer you or the group or the crew what they had, we should respect and acknowledge the calling official's perspective. If it's warranted, then offer your perspective. If it is an alternative perspective or approach, then offer it second, not first. This slide right here, more than most, is the reason that some officials, especially younger officials, do not want to work with so-called veteran officials or so-called older officials. This right here. We must do better in our discussions and conversations about plays. Sometimes there is a right answer, and sometimes we must accept we were wrong, this would have been right. And sometimes there may not necessarily be the right answer, but we must be willing to accept, respect, and acknowledge everyone's perspective and start with the perspective of the calling, decision making official first. If you are officiating my PCA, then who is officiating your PCA? Okay, before we begin this analysis on this slide, if you're not a basketball official, then PCA pretty much stands for primary coverage area. And you have another acronym, SCA, that stands for secondary coverage area. Pretty much primary coverage area means the location where you are in the proximity of players within your area that you are responsible for first and foremost. And that's just to break down what PCA and SCA means for my non-basketball officials. Does a particular play and its development require you to officiate both your PCA and my PCA? Some may, some may not. Are you officiating my PCA because you are ball watching? Question for you. How do you remember the plays in my PCA, yet you can't recall any plays in your own PCA? Is there any activity in your PCA at the time where your primary focus is in my PCA? And this last point is the real question we should ask. Are you officiating in my PCA because of your lack of faith and trust in me to officiate? How about it? Brave enough to answer that question? Optics are paramount in officiating. While optics do not always equate to truth and facts, they matter because people will often react to optics. If we understand optics, then we have more knowledge in which we can do our job even better. While I personally do not go about trying to disprove negative optics, I wish to do my job in the most professional manner to present positive optics. Here it is right here, ladies and gentlemen. Your words, your behavior, and actions matter. You should want them to be easily understood such that they cannot be perceived wrongly. Your words, your behavior, and actions matter. Your words, your behavior, and actions matter. And they reflect upon your crewmates and other officials moving forward. I'm going to stay on the slide for a little bit of time. And the reason I'm going to do so, because when I started officiating 15 years ago, I was told the very opposite of what I'm going to tell you now. Now, there's a caveat to this slide and I'm going to present it in the way that I'm going to present it. Game, time, score, situation, and location does matter. Now, some of you are going to disagree, you're going to argue, and carry on like a mad person at hearing that statement. So let me preface it by saying this. You do not call and make decisions in officiating based on these. What I'm saying to you, you do not kick rules and ignore rules and mechanics based on these factors, but they do matter and they should play a part in your decision. And if you don't believe me, wait until I explain why they matter. The game matters. The skill level of the players matter. The coaches matter. You don't believe that? Watch this. I can tell you from personal experience, and I have officiated almost every sport you can think of, and I currently still referee basketball and volleyball. I am very fortunate to live in the state of Georgia, and we have some of the top football, basketball, volleyball sports in the United States. I have had the pleasure of refereeing future pros and future college stars. And I have had the pleasure more times than not, my high school contest, refereeing high level players. Many who are college bound or potentially college bound. You know what people that come to see these games didn't come to see? They didn't come to see me. They did not come to see how much I know. They didn't come to see how smart I am. I can almost tell you that the higher level a game is, if you are in a contest or a sport where whistles are used, you have a better chance than not of blowing fewer whistles on higher level, higher skill games than you do in contests where the skill level is not as high. The venue and the location of the game matters. I'm not going to dive deep into that. It does. The score matters. One, the score needs to be correct at all times if possible. And two, when contests are still close throughout the entirety of the contest, or when they are close near the end of the contest where the game's outcome is still in doubt, the score will dictate a team's approach to given situations. And if the score is important to the team, it should be important to us. The time of the game and the score of the game and the latter moments of the contest is going to matter to them. So it sure as heck better matter to us, which leads to situations matter. Situation matters. Who, what, when, where, and why matters. Time matters. What do most people remember? In the contest that's coming down to the latter moments of the contest where the outcome is still yet to be determined, most people are going to remember the end of regulation, in overtime, last few minutes, and seconds in that contest. Having described all of this, I dare an official come to me and say that game time, score, situation, and location don't matter. If you believe that, I don't want to work with you because you don't care. I didn't say kick a rule based on these factors. I didn't say ignore rules. You must be consistent in your applications of rules and mechanics. But these factors matter because they impact how players and coaches go about their game, and so it should matter to us because we are a part of that game as well. I'm sorry that I took a little longer on that slide, but I need to hammer this point home, not for veteran officials, but for the up and coming official. These things do matter. And if they matter to you, then guess what? You care about the game. And if you care about the game, you are someone that I want to work with. If you've had the pleasure of knowing me or listening to me in any training presentation where I talk about this is one of my biggest pet peeves. I can officiate strictly or primarily for money if I choose. You sure as heck can. You sure can. If money is your motivation for officiating and you're officiating from a check, I don't have a problem with you. And I'm going to tell you why for the 100 millionth time for people that know me. If this statement is problematic for you and offends you, this is what you need to do. Take your game pay that you made for that contest where money shouldn't be your primary factor of officiating. For all those people that say, don't do it for the check, or we don't officiate for the check, or you're not doing it for the check. Take that check, take that game pay, either give it to charity or give it to other officials. Give it to me. Officiating is a job. And almost any job you can think of, you are compensated for the services that you render. You know why I get along with many people? Because I stay out of their business. And I choose not to infringe upon their business unless they make it my business. i.e., if you are my partner and I'm meeting you for the first time, I'm not going to ask you if you're officiating for the check or for money. If you are a decent to good to great partner and you're a professional in what you do, that's all that matters to me. It does not matter why you are officiating said sport. If you want to make it my business, it's a whole nother realm, that's a whole nother discussion. And I am not going to judge you when I haven't experienced something. So I'm definitely not going to judge you for why you officiate, especially if you're doing it for money, because I am not perfect enough to be able to judge anyone. Said officials equate many years in a profession for knowledge and wisdom. So let me ask you, referees, this, not officials. I want to ask referees if you shouldn't officiate for the money or the check. Why are you still doing it for 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years? Why are some of you still doing it past the time that you really should be doing it? Where your physical, mental, and emotional abilities have passed you by due to just natural age and you should retire. For some of you, if you're not doing it strictly for the money. Again, if you're just doing it for the fun of the game, the love of the game, give your check to charity or other officials. Keep it moving. I'll break it off the slide before I get off my soapbox. Officiating is a customer service job. It is a very unique job where you deal with people all of the time. I've said many times in this presentation that the reason we lose officials are because of several points I've made in this slide. This is definitely one of them. Because officiating requires to render unique services to customers of diverse backgrounds, races, cultures, genders, etc. And some of us are too close-minded to interact with people of diverse backgrounds and races, and cultures and genders, and now people of different sexualities. I didn't even say religions. Officiating requires that its employees have comprehension of human behavior. That is why many of us, not some, many of us fail miserably. Okay. In baseball and softball, when you rule safer out on a play close at a play at the plate, half the people are going to react positively and half of them are going to react negatively. In basketball, if there's a block shot attempt and the shot is legally blocked and there's contact, one team is going to like it, the other team is not. I can list examples in all the sports, but I think you get my point. That's human behavior. For every call or every no call, for every decision you make to call or not call something, there's going to be a reaction. That is called human behavior. Provided that it's not disrespectful, it's human nature. And a lot of us do not know how to deal with that. Another reason a lot of us don't know how to deal with that is because a lot of us that referee sports and not officiate sports can't come to terms with the fact that we might be wrong and someone else might be right. And it might get pointed out to us within the game or contest itself that we are incorrect or that we have misapplied something. And we don't handle being human well. The best customer service employees are proactive in observation. They also know to listen and observe first, then react accordingly. Customer service is a mixture of negotiating, regulating, parenting, counseling, teaching, and dictating. Sometimes you may have to do a singular role, sometimes you may have to perform multiple roles. Officiating is a customer service job which many of us fail miserably because we are not strong enough, intelligent enough, and open minded enough to know how to deal with people. You know, this particular point right here, point 25, I chuckle in an ironic and almost sad way because this should really be common sense for sports officials, i.e., referees. Like, we should really know this and hold ourselves accountable just based on this alone. But as we know, common sense, ironically, not common. As an aside, because I like spoilers, we're going to talk about common sense before the conclusion of this presentation. This is the 21st century. At the time that this presentation is being recorded, the year is 2023. Assume that your game is being recorded and assume that the powers that be have access to said recording and, depending on circumstances, will view said contest. It is a shame that I am even having to discuss this, but based on the words, actions, and behavior of sports officials, sometimes coaches and players too, I really have to say this. There shouldn't be anything earth shattering about this statement. It's true. Almost all modern smartphones and almost all modern tablet computers can record, edit, and stream video in very high quality. Watch this. Not only can they record and edit games in high quality, they can stream them live. They can even upload them to various sites all over the world in a matter of minutes, hours. Like, technology is so awesome now. By the time a sports official leaves the event or game site and returns home, the entire contest that you officiated can be seen online and possibly has been seen by the powers that be, depending on circumstances. Most modern venues and event sites have video recording and streaming capability. Assume somewhere in their ceilings and in the rafters that your game's being recorded. Many schools and universities, from high school all the way up, can record, edit, stream video in very high quality. So, sports officials, I hope, if for nothing else, this alone will hold some of you more accountable to what you do and make you better going forward. Assume the moment you get to a game site, event site, or venue that what you do from that point on is being recorded. Going an entire season without imposing penalties and sanctions is not a badge of honor. Do you know? Again, I referee volleyball and basketball, and I have heard officials tell me to a group of people, I have not had to give a red card all season. I have not had to give a yellow card all season. I have not had to give a sanction or penalty all season. I haven't had to verbally warn anyone all season. I have heard officials in basketball tell me I haven't had to give a technical foul all season. Ladies and gentlemen, that's nothing to brag about. Let me show you why. One of the last and biggest chapters in almost all officiating rulebooks is conduct. That is by design. That is not by mere coincidence. 9 times out of 10, handling issues of conduct and behavior early in a contest will result in us not having issues later. Officiating mandates us to handle issues of negative behavior and sporting conduct. It literally is in the rule book. Now, let me throw some twists here. If you are one of those people, and I used to be this person early in my career, so guess what? I can speak on this. And you are issuing a ton of conduct penalties and sanctions, you are the common denominator in all those situations. And not saying that you are wrong in those situations, but the denominator is you, and part of the issue may be you. Maybe you have a short fuse and a short tolerance, and therefore your short fuse and your short tolerance and your emotional reaction leads you to impose numerous conduct penalties and sanctions. Conversely, if you are not issuing any conduct penalties and sanctions, you are the common denominator again. I can tell you something right now. The issue is you. Ladies and gentlemen, in a world where sports are played by imperfect beings called human beings and coached by imperfect beings called human beings and officiated, hopefully, by imperfect beings called human beings, someone's going to act up. And I'm not saying that in that moment we should go to the most severe penalty, but circumstances may warrant that you have to, or the most severe sanction. But even a verbal warning, when warranted, it needs to be handled. Bragging that you haven't had to impose penalties and sanctions, ladies and gentlemen, are proof of this slide. That's not the badge of honor you think it is. You know what I want to brag about? The championship game I had, or the postseason contest I was able to work, or that I got promoted to do higher level work, or I was able to officiate this many games, or I got to work this particular game with these particular players that are going collegiate or pro, or I got to work with these great officials. Those are the things that I want to brag about and have as accomplishments on my resume. You will never see me put on my officiating resume, which I have, by the way. Sports officials, you should have a resume. I will never put as a bullet point, I went an entire season without giving a technical foul. I went an entire season without giving a red card. If you do, good luck with that. The last chapter of the rule book is entitled Common Sense. I'm not going to dive deep into that. That should be self explanatory. If you look in your rule book and you say, Damon, I don't see a chapter called common sense, trust me, it's there. Common sense is a part of officiating. Officials use their common sense. Referees do not. And that's all I got to say about that. Officiating, ladies and gentlemen, is a combination of the following: rulebook knowledge, casebook knowledge, mechanics knowledge, signal knowledge, common damn sense, and great customer service. Now, these are the bare minimum requirements for game activities and match activities on site activities. I haven't even dived into all the things you should do off the field and off the court. I have other presentations we have created that dive into that as well. But as far as officiating contests, this is what officiating is. If you lack one of these, that is an area of improvement you need to make. Why do I know this? Because not too long ago, I am the person that had to make improvements in one or two of these areas. And even as I am blessed in my 15 seasons of officiating high school and collegiate contests, as well as national level tournament contests throughout the United States, I am still working to improve in these areas. This is officiating, ladies and gentlemen. We want to thank you for spending the better part of an hour with us in this particular training presentation. We just felt it was necessary. And none of us are perfect. I'll be the first person to tell you that in a lot of these points, at some point in my career, I was that official. I was that official that the presentation is talking to. And I like this presentation because I think it can help a lot of us. It can help me because it reminds me not to become that person for which a lot of these bullet points refer to. We can all be great, good, decent. We can all be better. We just have to be open minded enough and willing to listen to someone tell us where we may need to improve and for you or others to consider that. Dear fellow officials, thank you for spending part of your day or night with us. Have a great game. Have a great day, great night, great week, great year, great season. We'll see you down the road.